was there that day. I was going into the city to celebrate the Passover. I had been there many times before, but this time I was going in to celebrate the Passover, and he was being led out as the Passover lamb. Of course, we didn't know it at the time. My companions and I didn't really know what was going on. We walked into the city, and it's always an air of excitement when we're celebrating the Passover, but this was different. This was different that day. There was this large group of people, and there was lots of shouting and yelling, and there were Roman soldiers, and there were teachers of the law alongside of common people. And they were walking out on this road, and it was the road that led to Golgotha. It's the place where they do crucifixions, where they kill people. And so we didn't really know what was going on, so we made our way down to this procession, and we tried to get a closer look, and we kind of weaved our way through the crowd. And I finally got up where I was right there in the front, and I could see what was happening. I saw this man, and it's unlike anything I'd ever seen before, really, on a human body. He was bruised from head to toe, beaten. His body was broken. On his back, there were these big gaping wounds. They were pouring blood, and a lot of it had dried up. It had happened previously, I guess, but I looked over at one of the Roman soldiers, and on his belt, he had this flogging whip. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those before, but it's like a normal whip, but at the end of it, it breaks off into strands. And they tie pieces of glass and rock to those strands. And so when they whip you, the whip digs into your flesh, and then they rip it free. And so we didn't really know who this man was. And then I heard somebody yell, "Hey, Jesus, you saved other people. Can't you save yourself?" Jesus. We had heard that name before. Of course, everybody had heard the name of Jesus. He was a teacher. And he was teaching with authority, but he wasn't one of the Pharisees or the Sadducees. He was teaching a little differently. And actually, they were upset with him. They were angry with him. In fact, recently, he had claimed to be the Son of God. He had claimed to be Messiah. We didn't think that could be true, though, right? This can't be true. We always were taught that the Messiah would come back, and he was going to be a warrior leader. He was going to be like King David or like Joshua, right? He was going to lead us back to prominence. So this couldn't be the Messiah. And as I was looking at him and just seeing how broken he was, I felt someone grab me. They grabbed my cloak. This Roman soldier, this guard just grabs me, and he pulls me out into the road, and he throws me down beside Jesus. And he says, "Help him carry his cross." I was just shocked. I didn't know what was happening. I was on the ground, and I remember seeing the blood in the dirt. This blood, if it gets on me, if this man Jesus, if his blood gets on me, I'm unclean. I can't celebrate the Passover. And so all these thoughts are going through my head, and then I look over at him. He had fallen down, and the weight of his cross almost looked like it was going to crush him. He was breathing heavily. I looked at him, and he looked over at me, and I looked into his eyes. One of them was swollen, almost completely shut. It had dried blood and dirt, and then the other eye was blood and sweat and tears, and it was blurry, and he blinked it away. And then I looked into the eyes of this man, and I thought he should be desperate. I thought he should be scared. I thought he should be just fearful. But what I saw was different. What I saw was compassion. Compassion for me. He's the one who's being led to his death. He's about to be killed on a cross. Yeah, when I looked into his eyes, I knew, I don't know how I knew, but I knew he was the Messiah. And then all these thoughts that I had about the teachers teaching about the prophet Isaiah, saying that he would have to be killed. We didn't understand it fully at the time either, but we knew then that he was the Messiah, that this was fulfilling the prophecy that we heard back by Isaiah. So the Roman soldier, he nudged me and said, carry his cross. And I took it from Jesus, and I put it on my shoulders. And I didn't know it at the time, but that cross that I thought was Jesus's, that I thought I was about to carry, was actually my cross. My sins, my shame, they were on that cross. And later the disciples told me that Jesus had predicted his death, and after he predicted it, he told one of them, he said, if you want to come after me, you must take up your cross and follow me. And that's what happened that day. Jesus got up, the Roman soldier picked him up and nudged him forward, and I began following closely behind him. One of the Roman guards came running out of the crowd, and he had made this crown out of the thorns that grow on the trees around Jerusalem, and he took it and he put it on Jesus' head, and he pushed it down, and fresh blood started rolling down his face again. We made our way towards the end of the road, and the insults that they were yelling at Jesus and the spit from the crowd now landed on him and me. And we got to the end, we got to the place where they were actually going to put him on the cross. And the Roman guard, he grabbed me and he pushed me back into the crowd, and then he took my cross, the cross that bore my shame, my sin, and he laid it down in the dirt. And then he took Jesus, the Messiah, Jesus who was innocent. Jesus didn't deserve any of this. He was a good teacher. He was healing people. He was kind. And I did have sin in my life. I'm not a perfect man. And Jesus, they took him and they laid him on my cross. And they took his arms and they spread them out, and they drove this long spike, into each one of his wrists. And then they crossed his feet, and they drove another spike through his feet. They lifted him up and placed the cross in the hole in the ground, and his broken body slumped down, and he began to have difficulty breathing. He was suffocating, and every once in a while he would pull himself up on these spikes, and he would take a deep breath, and then he would fall down again and start to have a hard time breathing. I couldn't watch. I couldn't bear to watch as I was confused about what was going on, but it was starting to make sense that this really was Jesus and the Messiah. And I looked down at my hands, and the blood that I thought would make me unclean was actually the blood that made me clean. See, that was the day that I helped Jesus carry my cross. That was the day that Jesus hung and died on my cross. That was the day that Jesus died for me.
They led him out to crucify him. They forced a man coming from the country who was passing by to carry Jesus' cross. He was Simon of Cyrene, the father of Alexander and Rufus. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Then they crucified him and divided his clothes, casting lots for them to decide which each would get. Now it was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The inscription of the charge written against him was the King of the Jews. They crucified 2 criminals with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by were yelling insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "Ha! The one who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself by coming down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests with the scribes were mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, but he can't save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, so that we may see and believe. Even those who were crucified with him taunted him.